Happy Friday morning, everybody. Thanks for checking in our latest TDR Trade to Black podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Shad Dales. Lots to dive into today. I know we got a lot as the Attorney General. However, want to dig a little deeper into this. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. There could be some stuff that could be contested in Washington. So we bring in cannabis lobbyist Don Murphy to understand the process that needs to be taken, because we still have a long ways to go before any finalization or any ruling is actually passed in Washington pertaining to that. As well, Dan from the Chart Guys will join in just a moment. He expressed some interest in psychedelic stocks last week, so we'll find out what charts he's been following. And lastly, Anthony Coniglio, CEO of NewLake. Here's a stock that continues to perform well in a highly volatile industry. He'll join us and check in this morning. So lots on the go. So let's welcome in Anthony Varell here on a Friday morning. Good to see you.
How's it going? It's been a good week.
It's been, considering what's happened last week, I think this is about as good as you can get. You know, I think there is some optimism amongst a lot of people in the space pertaining to obviously the Matt Gaetz announcement that we announced, or basically outlined on the live stream on Wednesday. However, lots still at play here. Lots still got to get figured out. And I think we're far from over as to this actually becoming official, don't you think?
We're ways away from this becoming official.
Yeah.
There's checks and balances that need to be gone through. One of the candidates is controversial, even though I do think he gets through ultimately. But yeah, you couldn't have a stronger group of people in Washington right now, including Susie Wiles, RFK, Matt Gaetz, that have spoken, Donald Trump, that have spoken about the cannabis industry from a firsthand perspective, and said what needs to be said, taking a sensible approach and understanding what we need. We're not hearing anything to the tertiary. We're hearing cannabis needs to be banked, it needs to be or descheduled, and it needs to be addressed once and for all, and just free the plant and create efficient capital markets and get reform. Now, don't get fancy with it. Let's go with what we know and what we need and take it from there.
You got a really good vocabulary. I don't know if I ever told you that.
I try.
Listen, one of the good guys in the cannabis space is the CEO of NewLake Capital, which trades on the OTC under the ticker symbol NLCP, a friend of the show, Anthony Coniglio. Let's welcome him back. Good to see you. Happy Friday. Look at that smile. How are things?
Hey, guys. Happy Friday. Good to see you. And I agree. Anthony is extremely articulate.
Isn't he? Some of the
he
words
makes a compelling case for our industry.
Some of the words he used, I just sit there and nod and think,
yeah, it's quite amazing. You know, excited to hear Don talk later.
I know.
We were sitting here in mid-August, and we would have said to most of the people that come on your show, okay, the Republicans run the table in November. How do you feel as a cannabis executive or investor? I think most people would have said, oh my gosh, like the prohibitionists will have moved in. And just look at the feeling now, right? This reform movement, it's actually so much more exciting than any of us would have expected, although maybe some people out there knew it but weren't saying.
Well, I think people are hopeful with change. You know, I was watching a clip last night on YouTube with Joe Rogan, and he was outlining some of the things they could not talk about had Kamala actually joined his podcast. Right. And the number one thing they brought up was cannabis legalization. And when I saw that, it grabbed my attention big time, because I'm thinking, you know, if she would have got reelected, there's a good chance we could have remained the status quo, but there's no sense dwelling on that now. What we do know is Donald Trump has been elected. A lot of, I don't know, before we get into numbers, what do you think of all this stuff this week with the Matt Gaetz news and that?
Listen, none of us really know where this plane is going to land, so to speak, especially as it's not even taken off yet. But one thing is very, very clear to me. This is a reform-minded, anti-establishment administration that's going to come in. So somewhat, no matter who ends up in those roles, the mandate is clear that it's anti-establishment. And again, go back to the conversation that we've been having for years around this sector in Washington, D.C., was the prohibitionist and the establishment needing to change that mentality. And so while we're kind of running the table right now in terms of people who've been named as appointees, even if they don't get through, this administration will have that reform-minded approach. And I think it's really positive for the industry.
Yeah. I think the cannabis space, people like the idea of Matt Gaetz potentially becoming attorney general, but he is a very controversial political figure. Is he not, Anthony?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I was going to say Anthony V because he's one of like your congressman.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to like about Matt Gaetz. There's a lot that you could argue that Matt Gaetz isn't a bastion of integrity. If I want to put it politically correct, he was a wrecking ball with Kevin McCarthy as far as ejecting him from Speaker of the House. Granted, that was old school politics. It was kind of, I don't want to say entertaining because it did have some ramifications, but it was entertaining to see. I mean, that's how things used to get done throughout the houses of Congress within the U.S. government. He made more enemies than friends.
Yeah.
As it relates to that, he's had some allegations brought against him for things that a lot of people would frown upon. I live in a world where you are innocent until proven guilty. They went through the motions. He's not charged of anything. You can say what you want to say, but in a court of law, he has not been charged. If he is, I'll take the complete opposite stance and come down on him for it, as that is something I wouldn't want somebody representing me with in a body of government. But it is what it is. He's positive for the sector. I think he's going to be a bulldog as AG, and I think he's going to get things done. And the thing that the best is here, we already have the HHS memo. We already have rescheduling wheels in motion. They don't have to start any of this stuff. They need to just finish it.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll see.
Eric Spadell writes, already a done deal. Gaetz wouldn't have resigned if he didn't think he would get confirmed.
I want to believe that, but I will believe that when it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he resigned to avoid embarrassment and potential censure or disciplinary action. But that's all speculation. What do we know?
Well, what I do believe in is the direction that your company's going. Third quarter results actually recently came out, included 9.3% revenue increase year over year, totaling 12.6. You continue to provide a dividend at 43 cents per share. Currently $19.8 million in cash. Look, we look at this space, and I think volatility is putting it mildly, considering what's happened, especially even in the last 2 weeks. You guys have maintained value, and at the same time, too, I look year to date, you're almost up 15%. We saw some of your peers not have the greatest earnings, but at the end of the day, I don't want to like this. You got to view this as a very great year for the company, knowing what's happened in the space and how stocks are performed, don't you think?
Yeah, I think the true success of this year has been the expansion of our investor base. We have a much broader retail base. Our liquidity is significantly improved. It's really difficult. You talk about this all the time on your show. The liquidity in this industry, being on the OTC, very, very difficult to manage a public company this way and to get new investors at scale into your stock. So we've really spent a lot of time this year broadening out that investor base. And so, really happy with that. And I think that's part of why you've seen the movement in our stock this year. It's more people having awareness of what the team has done. As far as the performance in the most recent quarter, really the seeds of that success, if you will, were sowed 2-3 years ago. It's about the deals we put into place that are now performing. And we're not perfect. It's not as if there aren't an issue in the portfolio. I want to be clear about that. People can read that. But I think we get paid for that risk and the yields that we get on the leases we put in place. And I think we've demonstrated in previous years when there's been an issue in the portfolio, we're able to work through it, resolve, and continue to grow the dividend for our shareholders. So
can you give me an example as to like something you did say 2-3 years ago that, to your point, is like really resulting in success now?
Yeah, so it's the underwriting approach that we take. We really have liked to focus on limited licensed jurisdictions. These are jurisdictions that most people understand where there's regulated, like a Pennsylvania market, more like alcohol than anything else. And we've minimized our exposure to those unlimited licensed jurisdictions where you see the predominance of the problems. Limited our exposure to Michigan or Oregon or Colorado or California. And so I think it's that one approach plus what we call EBITDAR. That's the property level EBITDA plus rent. So what's the cash flow of that property generating? Because collecting rent is important. And we always knew that pricing would compress. That's been the story for the last 2 years. Margins compressing, pricing compression, more competition. Shouldn't have been a surprise to anybody, right? So many people were coming into the sector. And so if you model that out and you make sure what you're investing in can withstand that type of margin compression, you're probably going to be in a good position to collect rent.
we saw numbers go up. We saw successful numbers again this quarter. And you've always been very, I don't want to say cautious, but tactical in your capital deployment throughout the quarters with increasing your footprint. Are you thinking any differently to how to deploy capital now with this administration that's in and the activity that we're seeing in the capital markets?
Not at all. When you underwrite transactions from a capital perspective, in our view, especially when you're entering into a 15-year lease, you need to underwrite that with the status quo. You can't underwrite that with the expectation that something's going to change for the better. That has to be opportunity for upside in the calculus. And so, no, it's not that we're making decisions any differently. And I think cautious is a fair way for us to, for you to describe our investment approach. Certainly the pace of our investment over the last 18 months has been much slower than the pace of investment over the previous 18 months. And that's very, very intentional. We don't want to grow for growth's sake. It's not about just grow. It's about quality growth, because again, these are 15 to 20-year leases. So you need a credit on the other side that can sustain that rental payment. It's somewhat easy to do the deal, harder to collect rent for 15 years.
Forgive me if I'm incorrect, but are you in Florida right now from an asset standpoint?
Yes, we have a cultivation with Curaleaf in Florida.
Okay, so with Amendment 3 now not passing, does that change the and I'm not talking about yourself specifically, but just overall from a capital deployment standpoint, how do you then think about the market as far as on a go forward basis? Do you now kind of just look at it as per the medical market that it was before the assumptions of A3, and then just continue to I guess watch it mature and grow with the pretenses of adult use coming at some point in time? Or I guess how are you looking at Florida in, let's say, a post A3 world?
Yeah. Listen, it's important to say and remind everybody, Florida continues to be a very, very good medical market, and it'll continue to expand. And I think it'll continue to grow. We know, I would say with almost certainty, that there will be adult use in Florida at some point. We just don't know what year it's going to be. Will it take 2 years? Will it take 4 years? But we fundamentally believe that there'll be adult use there. Yeah. And why that's important is because if you go with an operator, and you execute a transaction in Florida, you have to make sure that operator has the ability to adapt to any regulatory change that may come with adult use. So there are a lot of very, very large competitors in Florida. So will somebody you're executing a transaction with be able to compete with them, not only in the current medical environment, but in an uncertain adult use environment?
So in the event we do see consolidation in that market, like how do you adapt through that? Because Boris Jordan, what was the comment he made last week, Anthony? Just, you could see one multi-state operator buying out another one, and like therefore like selling some of these assets and like increasing their storefront.
Yeah. So there's definitely going to be some consolidation, and there has been in our portfolio. We've had a couple of companies that were tenants of ours get acquired by other companies. So we've seen this before. And it's part of portfolio management. In fact, what you typically see is that a stronger company is typically buying out a weaker company. So to the extent one of our properties is acquired, it's typically going to be a credit upgrade for us. And so we embrace that. Where it becomes difficult is from a concentration perspective. If we have our number one concentration, which Curaleaf is our number one exposure in the portfolio, if they acquired, say, our number two exposure, say Cresco, another top 3 exposure, well, now you're really concentrated into Curaleaf, but it's a better company. And so you're probably okay having that over concentration. It's unlikely that we would see, say, one of our smaller tenants, say an acreage, take over a Curaleaf and become one of our larger ones. So it typically means a credit upgrade.
Yeah.
Are you looking at New York right now, or is there anything that you're seeing that's interesting coming out of the New York market? I mean, I think we're starting to see it hit, I think, $1 billion, like 1.2 billion annualized run rate. Numbers have been looking like they've surely been trending up. I mean, is that a market of interest right now from a real estate perspective?
Yeah, I think New York's, and we've been saying it for 2 years, New York's going to be a great wholesale market, given the amount of dispensaries that are opening up, given the lack of new cultivation facilities, because nobody has access to capital to be able to construct a large scale grow. Now, if you go back to the history of New York with the original 10 ROs, the registered operators, they built out substantial capacity. And so capacity is getting turned on already at some of the large facilities that exist in the state. There is some additional building that needs to go into building out capacity. So a very strong wholesale market, and depending where the retail stores are, could be a strong retail market as well.
Yeah. Well, lots on the go for sure. I don't think we always talk about pubco companies here, but the private side of this industry is absolutely flourishing as well across the country, which is a large piece of your business as well. But anything you can shed to us, because let's face it, as more and more companies try to increase market share in specific markets, they're going to obviously want to start looking at some of these private companies. But what have you learned the most about some of these key states that are performing, like Pennsylvania, Ohio? You just mentioned New York. But on the private side, like, is there anything that you could share that maybe would grab our attention that we may not be unaware or may not be aware of?
Yeah, I wish I could come up with some gem that everybody says, but the reality is the more we see in this space, the more it's the same as every other industry in this respect. It's all about execution.
Yeah.
It's a hard business. Guess what? There's lots of other hard businesses out there too.
Yeah.
But it's about core execution. It's about having a strategy that's responsive to your consumer, having an operational approach that creates efficiency and increases margin. And so it just comes down to strategy and execution. And the ones that do it well are the ones that succeed.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing that more and more. We've had those conversations. Some companies have brought in executives that had a CPG background, but not necessarily in cannabis. But now you're really starting to see a lot of these founders. We had a conversation with Frank Priolo from Ascend the other day, but these founders are actually getting their fingerprints all over the company again. And it all comes down to profitability, because we're at that part of the game now, right?
Yeah,
Should
it's
have been a while ago.
And cash flow, right? Cash is king. So it's all about cash flow, looking at current assets, current liabilities, making sure people are positioning themselves for the refinancings. I think some of the CPG executives that came into the industry, many of those came into difficult balance sheet situations. And so, was it really fair that they were in the process of making progress on the operational side, but sometimes when your balance sheet is loaded down with debt and you have tremendous amount of interest expense and you have to refinance, give up 30% of the company and see significant cash flow going out the door and interest expense. That's an outgrowth of an M&A strategy and may ultimately be successful. But sometimes I think it's difficult to step into those situations and really get operational change going when you're spending so much time focused on refinancing debt.
Yeah. Timing is everything too. And the timing hasn't been great as well for let's face it, the industry and how it's performed over the last couple of years. But listen, I always appreciate the guidance and direction that you provide us, not only for your company, but for the industry. Hopefully you can listen in the back end in the next little bit here as they're going to bring in Don Murphy to talk about some of the news this week. But appreciate you checking in and giving us an update, and let's keep in touch. Okay.
Awesome. Great talking to you guys. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah. Good guy. And very quietly and consistently going about his way in the business, which is something you don't see and hear all that often in the cannabis space. Dividends being provided and a stock being up for the year, which,
that's not a trend in the cannabis space.
Nope, it isn't. That's for sure.
It's good to see them bucking the trend, and you can point to why, and it's Anthony's leadership.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to bring you back in, but we're going to jump into a segment with Dan for the chart guys, and then we're going to bring in Don Murphy after this. But I'll check back with you in a couple of minutes, okay?
Sounds good.
All right, let's bring in Dan from the chart guys. Good to see you. Happy Friday. How are things?
Things are great. Thanks for having me.
Good. Well, we won't look at any technicals regarding cannabis because we know everything's being driven by headlines right now. But wanted to have you on this morning because you grabbed my attention last week about your interest towards psychedelics. And they had a recent run with a tweet last week with RFK, his appointment from the HHS. I was actually just reading a comment here from the Dank Informer from earlier, and it's actually, we had a little bit of a sell-off. But, regardless, a lot of optimism pertaining to this space. And I wanted to get you on just to maybe walk us through 2 or 3 psychedelic stocks that have piqued your interest in what you're seeing from a chart level. So with that, let's begin with MindMed that we always frequently talk about. Actually, we're going to go with Cybin first, CYB on the New York Stock Exchange, and see what we're seeing. And again, trying to shed some light on an industry, as I've said before, that people should not sleep on.
Yeah. So initially we had a bump up on the RFK, tweets. Then we pulled back normally. And then we had a new bump up on his appointment to HHS. So CYBN very clearly 1277 was a resistance level in July. And you could see initially we top out right there. And then again today we top out right there. So that's very clearly the line in the sand that has to turn into support if this uptrend is going to remain productive. And we do have a daily and weekly uptrend at this point. But just that 1277, 1280 zone has to become support. Otherwise, we're going to keep bumping our head on top of it and not going anywhere. So that's a key level. And as far as support, I would want to see the bulls maintain 1026 here, which was that little base of consolidation on their recent earnings reaction.
Yeah. So when I look back last week, what decided, what grabbed your attention? Because you're not a type of person that's going to just start buying stocks based off of an announcement. So once the tweet actually came out from RFK, what was the first steps that you saw and were actually paying attention to get interested in buying some of these or investing in some of these stocks?
So MNMD has been building a base of support for well over a year. And that's, there's just a longer term structure has been developed. Cannabis was doing so all 2024, and then it just erased on the headline reaction or the vote reaction. And so it's as simple as that. There's a longer term structure. There's more support established. And then, the dangling carrot of potential headlines, obviously that's the wild card with everything in both of these sectors, but it's been progressive from a technical standpoint before this new dangling little carrot. And so that only makes me a little bit more interested.
So is MindMed's chart impress you the most in the space right now?
It does, because again, we got that long-term higher low here now at 503. We ran up, a few 100%, 400 or 500%. And then we got a new base of support, and now it's all about 1222, the recent high there. We have to get over that level. And if we do, we'll then be on an uptrend on the 3-month, the monthly, the weekly, the daily, all time frames. And that's obviously the best case to be, the best place to be as a bull.
So what do you then look for in the next week or two in order for that to happen?
So I need.
Is he still there? I think I might have lost him. Can you guys hear me? Give me a comment in the comment section if you guys can hear me. Hopefully it's not my end. Oh, I think he hears me. He froze. Okay. North Carolina internet. Okay. He's gonzo. Let's bring him back in. Dan, you there?
Yeah, it is my North Carolina storm internet. The storm internet. I got a wire right now across my driveway that they need to.
Somebody drove over your driveway, didn't they?
Probably. So MNMD has a base at $8. I was looking to add today. Honestly, I was going to buy today for a daily higher low. The headline came out yesterday afternoon. I missed it. That's just the way it goes. There's clearly profit taking on that headline. We broke the recent high, but didn't hold above it. So now we're just ping-ponging around with $8 being the base that needs to be maintained. And there's a clear resistance zone now in the $9 range. So again, it's always about the progress of forming those higher lows. And we want to see these bulls form a higher low compared to 8. But again, not an ideal day to have it's those gap ups, right? You gap up and you see a little bit upside, but then you give a lot of it back because on the gap up, there's no support established. And people in these sectors, rightfully so, are quick to hit the sell button to lock in some profit on fast, hard gains.
This company continues to impress me, but it's like this has been forming for quite some time, and you add in the actual data and the team that's in place, but you can understand why there is some keen interest pertaining to this stock in this space for sure. Drug development's high risk, but the data and the team they have in place definitely interests me, but this is even more encouraging to see the long form chart that's actually been forming over the past few months, if not the year. But outside of MindMed and Cybin, we now have the probably most well-known stock in the space, which is Compass. They've actually hit some hard times with regards to their trials recently. So what can you share with us and what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a cannabis chart. It's just a long-term downtrend. Yeah. We just hit all-time lows. There's a ton of progress that just comparing it to MindMed, to establish a long-term higher low like MindMed has, it would take 9 months. I mean, we would have to go up for 6+ months. We'd have to pull back for a higher low. Yeah. So we're nowhere near doing that. but I keep an eye on it just because it is one of the bigger companies in the space. And I have shifted to MindMed now being the leader just from a technical perspective, the dollar volume we see on a daily basis. But I keep an eye on CMPS because, if you're bullish MNMD, you want to see the entire sector doing well, and you want to see CMPS put in a long-term bottom and show some progress, but have to get over 661. That's our last longer-term lower high. If that's resistance, we're still in a clear downtrend.
Dan, do you see this being the same as the cannabis space? Like, if there is actual movement legislation-wise towards this next year, do you see it moving like cannabis where it's not just one stock, it's the whole industry?
Yeah, it'll definitely be a sector that moves together. And again, the rising sea raises all ships. And so you want the entire sector to be performing, even if you're only in one name and you got your favorite. It's definitely the kind of thing where you want to see headlines, you want to see attention. And we need, as always, we need concrete change. Words are great. We need concrete change.
Yeah, of course. Listen, appreciate you checking in. I know you got to run, but thanks for checking in here today. Okay.
All right. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks, Dan. All right, let's bring AV back in. And what'd you think of that long form chart that was building for MindMed? It really, really interests me, that stock. Doing very, very well, that's for sure. Well, let's dive into the elephant in the room. Bring in cannabis lobbyist Don Murphy here on a Friday morning. Look at that smile. How are you?
It's not the edibles, gentlemen. There's just a lot to be happy about this week, that's for sure.
All right. I want to manage expectations. Matt Gaetz, obviously Donald Trump made the announcement for Attorney General. First off, why do you think he chose Matt Gaetz?
Well, he chose Matt Gaetz for a number of reasons, but one of the points here is he didn't not choose him because of his position on cannabis policy, right? Like the new floor is cannabis policy does not disqualify you. Being good on it does not disqualify you from a Republican administration. So that is great news. Whether Matt Gaetz survives or not, I think going forward, whoever the replacement would be, and honestly, I really don't want to start to speculate as to whether he will make it or not. I mean, I'm going to believe he's going to make it. And even if he didn't, Plan B, or this is part of a bigger plan. Plan B is a good one too.
Whitaker now.
Yeah, I would look for somebody like Mike Lee. Now I want Mike Lee to be on the Supreme Court, and maybe he ends up as an AG and then the Supreme Court when the vacancy comes. But this is nothing but good news. We have been dealt a very good hand by President-elect Trump. And honestly, if we don't score in the next 2 to 4 years, we never will.
Okay, so before we get into these names, I just want people to understand the process as to what's the next steps. So if the Republicans control the Senate and the House, I don't think the House has anything to do with it, but control the Senate, can they pretty much dictate scheduling and calling for recess at some point where these appointments could be made? Like, how does this work? And, if this is going to be contested, what should people be aware of or concerned or be prepared for?
The quick answer is yes. And I've been saying this for 2 years. The person that holds the gavel, and for 2 years it's been Chuck Schumer and still Chuck Schumer, he controls everything. Bills go to the floor or don't go to the floor based on who holds that gavel. And starting in January 3rd, Republicans will hold that gavel. Now, according to John Thune, and he said it yesterday on the news, they will start these confirmation hearings as soon as they're sworn in. So someone asked me, like, well, when's Matt Gaetz going to be? And I'm like, I wouldn't expect it before February. Truth is, it will be in January. They'll start January 6th, I think, when they maybe come back. They'll come in, get sworn in on the 3rd, and then maybe leave immediately, come back on the 6th. For confirmation hearings, and they will start and they will run through about the 20th when Donald Trump is sworn in. Okay. He will then sign the papers that make those nominations official, because he can't nominate him when he's not president yet. So they'll make it official, and then those votes will be ready to go right to the floor. So they'll vote these things before the end of January, and they'll be ready to do floor votes end of January, beginning of February.
So what's the concern of this being contested, him potentially not being attorney general? How would that then happen?
Well, you'd have a number of Republicans, more than 3, publicly come out and say, either publicly come out and say, or privately just say, I'm not voting for him. He's done. And then Gaetz' nomination would be withdrawn, or he would.
Are these votes public or are they private?
They're absolutely public.
They're public. So we'll be able to see in real time who votes yes or no on the appointment.
Guys, you'll be able to be in the room if you choose to.
Okay.
Wow. With cameras? No.
Cell phones, perhaps, cameras.
There's this big rumor going around right now that the Republican Party is split up into 2 parties, the establishment and Trump loyalists. Like, how much truth is there to that? And if you have to, like, I know this is, I'm taking this a grain of salt because it definitely is legacy media that's reporting a lot of these stories. But again, speculation I don't want to do. But if you're inside these rooms, what do you think is going on as far as, like, I think you'd want to tread lightly by going against Donald Trump before his administration or his tenure as president even begins.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially those who face re-election in really red states in the next 2 years, in the next cycle. I talked about that once fairly recently. The next cycle is very good for Republicans. They have 1 senator who's up for re-election that would be sort of on the bubble. That's Susan Collins of Maine. But the rest are pretty much layups, and they only have to survive a primary. So if they went against Trump and Trump, put his thumb on the scale, they would be at risk. None of them are going to come out like that. They will defend their prerogative and their constitutional responsibility of advise and consent. And that's what you're seeing now. These guys are standing up before the microphone and saying, yeah, we're going to have full-blown hearings. Yeah, we want to see the evidence. Yeah, we want to, do a deep dive. And then they're going to end up doing what Donald Trump wants, most of them. And it's a matter of whether it's 51 or 52 or not. So
I think that's a good point, Don, because yesterday there was an insider from the Hill that came out and said, well, there's been a lot of yelling and screaming from certain senators, but when push comes to shove, expelling the energy in the political capital, Matt Gaetz might not be the hill that they want to die on just getting started with Trump's next 4 years.
Yeah, no. Well, I would suggest these senators, this is not a hill they want to die on. And I would also point out that, if you're a Democrat and you're a pro-cannabis legalization advocate or an incumbent Democrat, maybe you don't want to screw this up. Maybe you want to just vote no, hope he goes through, and then flames out, right? If you think he's going to be a disaster, let Donald Trump have the nominees he wants. Like, how can you rail against whether he was successful or not if you don't give him the tools he wants?
I agree with you, but I also find a hard time believing that any Democrat would rather screw over Trump and Gaetz versus get cannabis reform.
Well, that's true. We are exposing the fallacy of what they say versus what they do, right? Look, the same thing applies to cannabis advocates, virtually none of whom have come out and praised this nomination. They're all hardcore partisan lefties. They wear their politics on their sleeve. Look, I'm as partisan as the next guy, but I call out my party when they fail. I call out Democrats when they succeed. And I don't understand why they are not putting their day job first. Put your cannabis advocacy first and check your politics at the door. If you can't do that, get another job and get out of the way, because so far you've just delivered nothing.
So with this ethics probe that's going on in Florida, with Gaetz resigning, does that end now because of his resignation? Where does that sit? How does that work?
Well, yes, it ends, and they have no jurisdiction against a guy who's not in Congress, but the evidence does not go away. It's there for all to see, and I certainly believe Democrats will dredge up all of this stuff and do what they did to Brett Kavanaugh. There's no reason to believe they wouldn't do otherwise. But at the end of the day, Brett Kavanaugh was confirmed.
Where's Brett Kavanaugh?
Yeah.
I think he's sitting on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
If I'm not, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that
It's,
say about him resigning his position in Florida? Like
He had to.
Oh, he had to? Is that how it worked as far
Well,
as?
no.
Well, not effective immediately. But
Yeah, he did not have to resign in order to take this appointment.
Well, that's what
Not
I'm
at
trying
all.
to. That's what I'm getting to. Is that
No. In fact, it suggests now. I know people are saying, well, he resigned to get rid of the ethics report, and that may be true. But when you resign in anticipation of another job, if that other job doesn't come to fruition, I gotta believe there's a soft place to land for Matt Gaetz in this administration. And I think, Anthony, you said this in a post earlier today. We've never had a cabinet and administration this full of pro-cannabis reform people. And I retweeted it and I added, and these aren't Johnny-come-latelys who are just election year conversions and pre-election panderers and platitudes. These are people who have deeply held beliefs about ending the drug war.
Yeah.
And the funny part is that the left, who has advocated defunding the police, would somehow have a problem with a guy like Matt Gaetz being the head of the Department of Justice, which clearly needs reform. I mean, we watched that over the last 2+4 years under the Biden administration, the weaponization of the Justice Department. People do not have, they don't have trust in it. They just don't.
No.
And that's one of the reasons that Donald Trump is the incoming president.
And the one thing that I don't think has been said yet, but it's interesting to see, is the average age of Trump's cabinet. He's gotten significantly younger people.
Yeah, I see that.
Into all of the positions, with the exception of maybe RFK, who still, I don't think he's that old compared to what we saw with Trump's first time around, or even Biden's administration or Biden's cabinet.
Right.
Trump from an age.
Trump is a populist. He's a populist president. He governed as a populist president. He ran as a populist, and cannabis policy reform is very much a part of a populist agenda. I don't see us going backwards at all. I think Schedule 3 is the new floor. I think that's the least we would end up with, and we will end up with it pretty quickly.
So that's the only thing that I don't want to say I'm worried about, but that's the only wrinkle in this. Gaetz was against rescheduling. He didn't feel it went far enough. He wanted, or at least from an optics perspective, which you could argue, he just playing politics to kind of poo-poo what the Democrats were doing, and what Milgram was doing with, we don't need to reschedule this, we need to deschedule it. I would like for him to go in there, reschedule it, let's get medical research and let's get the gears in motion, and then start to run the descheduling initiatives and greater reform. I'm hoping he doesn't stop.
I don't think Matt Gaetz said anything we don't agree with, but I understand.
I agree with
I
everything
understand your concern, but I don't see him screwing up Schedule 3 in an effort to get more. We have seen this. That has been the playbook of the left forever. I think we could have rescheduled cannabis years ago, but Democrats didn't want just that. They wanted all the social justice, equity, reimagined policing, all of that. And that wasn't going to get through the Senate.
Yeah.
That couldn't even, that got through the House twice. That couldn't get through a Democrat-controlled Senate.
Yeah. And now you have RFK sitting in HHS, just in case we need 250 pages more of firepower to validate the potential medical use of cannabis.
Very good point.
With Thanksgiving coming up, we have a lot to be thankful for.
Huh. Yeah. Moment of truth. Does Matt Gaetz become Attorney General?
I would not bet against Donald Trump getting what he wants and who he wants.
Leave it at that.
I tend to agree with Don. Don knows more than myself, but I tend to agree that I don't think Trump's going to put somebody up there unless you want to go with he's the sacrificial lamb thesis to get other people through, which to me just sounds complicated. Those people could be correct, but I just don't. I don't see that.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary. I think he will get all those folks through without. I mean, there'll be a lot of screaming on the left, but that's all they are able to do at this point.
Yeah,
they're going to make life uncomfortable for Susan Collins. But beyond that, they can't stop them.
So I was thinking this, so maybe it makes for an interesting point, but I'm just going to bring it up. So Thune, now that he's Senate Majority Leader, if he brings safe banking for a vote and we don't get the votes, what happens then? Have we just proven the notion that we never had them in the first place? Or
man, I love you, Anthony, but I am not going down. I don't even see where that would ever happen. He's not going to bring the bill to the floor only to embarrass himself and the party. Not at all.
Okay.
Never, ever going to happen.
So the
strange part is if Schumer wanted to embarrass anybody, he'd bring that bill to the floor right now. And by the way, just to be clear, I didn't bring up safe banking. I don't want too much hopium going on already here. But
I've just been thinking. I was just thinking that. So in the occasion that we do hear that he is going to bring it to the floor, that means that thing has the votes. The talks have been done. It's going through. If it does start to get traction and we do hear that it could hit the floor for a vote.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
So Gretchen writes, Thune won't bring it for a vote because there aren't 50 Republican votes. What's your response to that?
Well, she's kind of right about that, right? It's not even that there aren't 50. There really aren't. I mean, as I calculated, it's about half or slightly less than half. And while a Hastert rule in theory was from the House, the Hastert rule kind of applies in the Senate, right? If 50 Democrats or 47 Democrats support a bill and 6 Republicans support the bill or 16 Republicans support the bill, it's not coming up for a vote, right? Because John Thune does not keep his job bringing up lefty bills for the benefit of Democrats. Now, I think in the future, SAFE becomes part of a much bigger package, comprehensive package. And by the way, that's what I spent the last couple of days on Capitol Hill talking to Republicans about, getting on board Trump's cannabis agenda, making sure that all the things Republicans want, conservatives want, libertarians want are in there. And I'm sorry, Democrats, but you had your chance. You had your chance for the last 4 years to do something, and you didn't. And you blame Republicans largely, and that dog don't hunt anymore.
I am hearing that I've seen it mentioned a couple times in the last couple of days that the stablecoin bill, not saying that SAFE is going to get attached to that, but regardless, that stablecoin bill is probably going to get ran through. They want that. They need that, and crypto is higher on the totem pole in terms of priority right now versus cannabis, due to the obvious implications of the banks, and just the weight that they carry.
Yeah, if safe banking is going to pass in the lame duck, it's going to be a passenger. Going to get a ride on some other big bill.
Yep. Well, listen, a lot going on. RFK, obviously, the appointment with the HHS. I think that grabs some interest. People feeling optimistic about change. Curious to see how that working relationship with Donald Trump will go over time, because I think what Donald Trump wants RFK to do versus what RFK wants to do are two different things. And, first off, I guess the first step is like, it's great to see that he was appointed in that position, but what was your reaction to it all?
Well, it's just another great opportunity for us, another person in the administration talking about cannabis policy reform, the drug use, he understands this. It's funny. I hear people say he's not credible, he's not qualified. Look, the guy was in a serious,
by all means.
Okay. He gets it. He gets it on a level that probably no or very few elected officials understand. I mean, I've had a lot of elected officials say, yeah, I smoked a bale of pot in my day, but they were never at the level that I understand that RFK was. So he brings a lot of personal experience and empathy to our effort. And I expect big things.
All is well, it seems right now, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Walk before we run, but we got things
turn on
moving.
A dime in a second.
Yeah. Things are moving in the right well, we hope they're moving in the right direction. But
Well, they absolutely are. There's never ever been a better time to be in this. I don't want to say sector because I'm not, I don't push the stock side, but as an advocate, I had a conversation with a reporter yesterday, and I looked around. I said, I think I'm the only guy here trying to work myself out of a job, and I'm okay with that. Right. I am ready to go. I mean, I would just be thrilled to go to a bill signing, get a pen, and never be heard from again. That's my exit strategy. And until that happens, I'll hang around a while. But it's fun to be a conservative drug policy advocate right now. There have been, in the last few years, not so much fun, but it's a great time to be me.
Yeah, I think the best way to look at it now, or at least the way I'm looking at it, is we don't know when the conversation is going to happen, but when it does, the people that are in the room understand what needs to be done and what the task at hand is. Yeah. And I don't think they're going to fuck with it. They're not going to try and get fancy. They're not going to try and attach a bunch of stuff that's going to piss a bunch of people off. They're going to get it done sensibly. And that sensible nature is exactly what the people want and what we've been asking for.
Yes.
For years now.
Yes.
Yeah, the timing on it is just.
And sadly, I'll add, I don't believe when the time comes for a Trump cannabis reform bill, comprehensive or whatever, comes to the floor, I don't think we get half the Democrats, because they will whine and cry that it's not good enough, that it doesn't have all these things. Wait a second. Much like we saw in Florida, where people were crying about things that, weren't in it, about who was in charge and all that stuff. We saw all those posts. You saw them. I saw them. They came from lefty advocates.
But didn't Cory Booker tell you to your face this week that safe is not a priority right now?
Yeah, I don't tend to kiss and tell, but somebody overheard that statement, and so they ran with it, and that's how it ended up, public. But yeah, that was accurate.
Because I thought I saw it on Twitter. I don't think I did see it on Twitter, where someone was quoting him saying, "Safe is not a priority right now."
Yeah.
Doesn't surprise me.
Doesn't surprise me.
Funny thing happens when you talk to elected officials in the hallway. People overhear those conversations.
Yeah.
And
well, to Gretchen's point, it needed to be public, because I completely agree.
Talk about actually. Natalie Ferdig's name being brought up in the comments. That's someone that's actually been objectively covering the space. She's praised Matt Gaetz. She's praised RFK. She took the political bias and the recency bias of the industry out of it. And she's reporting right now on the industry from a very straight perspective. And it was actually nice to see, especially as she does have some weight in her editorial ability.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm not a subscriber. I can't afford that level of subscription. But I heard the same thing from Kyle at MPP. He's been writing about this, and he's been getting an earful from progressives who don't like the slant that he seems to be taking. I don't see it as a slant. I see it as just facts. It is what it is. I know sometimes the tweets have a bias to them, and that's different. That's fine. But the reporting has been, best I can see, spot on, and he deserves credit for that. And I'm disappointed at those who just can't see this as the win that it is. And if you don't like it, you probably should get another job.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, someone actually pointed out the article that I think it was either Kyle or Tom authored on, I think it was one of Tom's articles actually, that he published on Marijuana Moment. It was about Senate Majority Leader Thune. It was basically everything that he said about cannabis, and it was very negative. And they were like, well, is this biased or whatever? I go, there isn't a single word in there. Unfortunately, those are the facts. And that is not biased. He said all of that, and he was a part of everything that he said. However, that is in the past. Let's see what he does in the future. As he is on the record saying that it's an evolving issue, and hopefully he can come around on the issue, especially if he's getting some signaling from the executive.
Yeah. My only problem with Marijuana Moment is they're not on Capitol Hill. I keep inviting them to come down. I keep urging them to be there. I think things would move a little quicker if there was a microphone stuck in the face of these members asking about cannabis policy. And I said the same thing to you guys. So thanks for coming down. And I look forward to seeing you again sometime soon.
Well, we got some big plans that we're working on right now for 2025, and we'll keep you posted on how that progresses. But it's going to benefit everybody involved, including companies in the space, investors, people of cannabis consumer, you name it. It's just overall awareness towards the space that we're working on right now that should see us hopefully with a lot bigger footprint, more consistency in Washington beginning next year. But we'll keep you posted on that. But Don, always appreciate you checking in. It's a little bit of guidance, and yeah, onwards and upwards. But look, things are moving in the right direction. Just proceed with caution, as we all know in this space. But thanks for checking in here this morning. Okay.
Yeah, you guys are welcome. Thanks for
thanks, Don,
for the invite.
Yeah,
Thanks, Don.
Always helpful, and I think that's spot on. Hey, he said like things are moving in the right direction, but I think I like your stance too. There's a long ways to go, and
it's funny because Kevin Sabet was celebrating earlier in the week when John Thune was named Senate Majority Leader, and he was basically saying like bye to safe banking, like basically taking a victory lap. And then you got Matt Gaetz and you got RFK, and it's been crickets from him.
Yeah.
Ever since, he didn't seem to have any comments on those two.
Dank Informer, I hear you. We actually reached out to RFK's team probably 6 months ago. One of our clients actually has a personal relationship with him, and we thought we were actually going to get something with him. We keep trying. I think that would be amazing to have him on, wouldn't it? We reached out to Danes' team. We've actually reached out to Joyce's team this week to see if we can get them on. Feedback so far is follow up in December. You can imagine how busy they probably are and have other priorities right now. But, you know, if anything, we're planting the seed. I do think that we'll be able to get a lot of these names on beginning in 2025, but don't think we aren't trying behind the scenes. Very much are, because who would not want to see that interview with RFK to talk about cannabis and psychedelics? That would be massive.
Correct.
All right. It's Fridays, and wow, we're at 52 minutes in. Guap, it's mic drop. Guap, let's cue the music. Let's bring him in. Hopefully he's got the shades on. Guap, you there? There he is. Ooh, look at that.
Greetings, Earthlings. My fellow Americans. My fellow Americans. My glasses are not blue nor red. They are green.
Okay.
So take your partisan hat glasses off and appreciate where we're at. I think Anthony and Don were dead on and kind of stole my thunder a little bit, talking about, you know, too many journalists, investors, even people in the space who are understandably perhaps really distraught right now and unable to see some of these planets that are aligning right now for the cannabis space. But I will caution anyone about getting too excited about a red wave. Right? We've seen this before. Like I'm having major deja vu. Blue wave happened. Stocks went crazy. Everyone super optimistic. This is people don't need a reminder, but I feel like they do. So I tend to be somewhere between cautiously and nauseously optimistic, avoiding the extremes of pits of despair or crazy euphoria. So I really just want to remind everyone of that. We've seen this before. And take off your glasses and take the W's a little bit. You know, if you're distraught about a Trump presidency, but something good happens on cannabis, hey, there's a nice silver lining for you.
Yeah. Well, I will say that Anthony and I are doing the best we can, but we're through to some pretty connected people in Washington and across the U.S. as far as just business-wise as well, to hear what they're hearing and seeing. But, you know, we're constantly having these conversations. But to your point, the Dank Informer, everyone, yes, does have an opinion, but nobody knows anything. I don't want to say we don't know anything, but we don't know the answer either. But it's not just cheap speculation as to what we're talking about here. But
here are some facts.
To your point, it's just like, here's the biggest thing that grabbed my attention in the last 24 hours, outside of obviously the announcements with Trump and with RFK. I said it off the top of the podcast when Joe Rogan mentioned that the things that he could not talk about with Kamala, and the number one thing he brought up was obviously legalization towards marijuana. And the first initial thought I got was like, oh, Jesus, like, am I ever glad she didn't get reelected of following this space, because it clearly was
didn't make sense.
It didn't make any sense at all. Like, she was leveraging this for her campaign, and at least it appears that way.
I mean, that statement, that to me, that statement just doesn't make sense, because if you're Kamala, you put out your black agenda, you talked about the social equity component within the cannabis industry and righting the wrongs due to the war on drugs being, let's say, well, not let's say, but it was disproportionate. It affected race. It affected people outside of being white disproportionately.
Yeah.
With the war on drugs. If you are going to do, I don't want to call it a mea culpa, but you're going to go and actually set the record straight as per your prosecutorial record.
Bingo.
You go on Joe Rogan and you talk about it, and you give a real talk into what you want to do to set the record straight, and what your administration would like to do to set the wrongs right via the war on drugs. You don't hide from it.
Yeah, and that's why I just think, like, what's happened in the last 4 years, my first initial thought, not saying this is right or wrong, is that, wow, she got reelected. It would have been the status quo for this space, and there would have been huge ramifications. And sadly, I think the industry would have bled out, which is why I just feel like this week, I think at first when you hear some of these appointments, it seems abnormal to think of these names that are being appointed. But I also think, to a certain degree, and controversial in some ways, there is some of this change that definitely needs to be needed, starting with RFK. But
here's where I'm at. Trump just got elected. It's a convincing victory. Thank goodness we didn't have to wait 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years to figure out who won. So now the cannabis industry has the opportunity to align itself, and definitely should, about what they want and need. They have very receptive people in the administration. Get your messaging together, get your budgets together, align yourself for the good of the industry and the plant. You have a major opportunity here. Do not squander it. And we're going to hold you accountable. I mean, that's
and that's the part, going back to your segment where you're saying, been there before, cautiously optimistic, feeling a little nauseous about it. We've been here before. We have. I don't know. If you knock on the door enough times, eventually it's going to open. Is that a great way of looking at things?
No, it's time to burst through the door.
What was that comment? A famous football coach in the 1980s named Bum Phillips was the head coach of the Houston Oilers. They weren't expected to do much, but they went all the way to the AFC Championship game and lost. And they said, Bum, how'd you feel? He's like, this year we knocked on the door. Next year we're going to knock the son of a bitch down. And I'm just like, well said.
Do it like Bum Phillips.
Bum
Knock the son of a bitch down.
This is great. Well, gents, look, gives us lots of great things to talk about each week in our podcast. That's for sure. If you want to stay up to date on the latest in Washington and all the content that we're producing, make sure to scan that QR code below right there and subscribe to our Baked In newsletter. Lots going on next week as well. We got a ton of lineups, including a psychedelic lobbyist and a Top Gun fighter pilot. Wiz Buckley will make his appearance back to the podcast. Want to get his take on the RFK appointment. Don't sleep on psychedelics, that's for sure. It's really grabbing a lot of interest. And as well, I'm trying to think. We got your friends over at Ease that are coming on Monday too, right, Anthony?
Yeah, Corey's going to be on Monday from Ease to talk about their most recent capital raise and the resurgence of the business.
Nice. And I'm trying to think if there's somebody else that we have on Monday. Ease.
Yeah.
Here's some catalysts coming up. ALJ hearing on the 2nd of December. Boys oral arguments on the 5th. We've got cabinet appointment confirmations. Is it a recess appointment nomination process jam through? Is it going to be more extended? Got the farm bill, got some sort of cannabinoid bill coming out of Wyden. I mean, there's a lot cooking right now. And I don't know. I'm excited. I'm just trying not to get too excited.
It's all good stuff.
Yeah. Just through green glasses now. This is just through green glasses. Take off your red and blue ones, please.
Yeah. If you haven't done so already, please smash that like button. Leave some comments. And yeah, I want to know, do you guys think Matt Gaetz will indeed be announced Attorney General? Will it go through? Leave comments below. I want to hear from you. I'll respond.
He's got the best eyebrows in the game. Let's be honest. Best.
Yeah. Whew. We saw those first up in hand 2 feet away.
Yeah.
He didn't like us. But
Let's
oh well.
not throw shade at the new Attorney General.
Yes.
That's right. Great guy. Love him.
Gaetz.
Love what he's going to do for the space.
Matt Gaetz is great. Gentlemen, in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. From all of us here at TDR, we'd like to say thank you. We'll see you back here Monday. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. Stay classy.
Perfect. Unity.
Now, that was a good one. What'd you guys all think? Did you like what we had to say here today? Do you agree, disagree with what we're saying? Love to get your feedback. As usual, leave comments below. Trade to Black is growing, and we wouldn't have done it without you. So if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also check us out on Apple and Spotify for the audio version. And as usual, leave lots of comments. We, as I said, love to hear back from you. Thanks again, everybody, for watching.